It was daytime, and in a beautiful crowded city somewhere on the planet, Lange was in the middle of the crowd, carrying a box with a stuffed animal and all his belongings. People's attention fixed on him. They wondered what was happening to Lange. They didn't understand why, in the prime of his life, he had decided to resign from his post just like that. The man with earrings placed a hand on his friend's shoulder and, with a serious gaze, began to whisper. He revealed that, due to his negligence in the line of duty, the White Mist Star Sector had lost a martial arts genius with extremely exceptional talent. This had provoked the fury of the Chief of Law Enforcement, Lunong. Hearing this, the elf-eared man's eyes widened in surprise, leaving him in shock. The friend felt somewhat confused, not knowing what kind of genius could make Lange, at the peak of level 11, lose his post. The man with earrings mentioned that apparently the answer wasn't clear. While they were conversing, the only thing Lange could do was lower his head and walk quickly. Lange clenched his teeth tightly, and his eyes began to glow with rage. The only thing he could do was curse Lan under his breath. Consumed by rage, Lange gripped the box tightly and began to scream like a madman. He never would have thought that someone with such an honest appearance could be so malicious. While he admitted to being careless, he wondered if Lan Cheng didn't bear even 1% of the blame. His friend's attention fixed on him, realizing he was about to go crazy. Lange lowered his head and felt depressed, not knowing what to do now. The others began to whisper among themselves, noting that his mood was changing every second. They wondered if he had already hit menopause, considering that, really, he should retire by now. Lange's face filled with sadness. Letting out a sigh, he decided it was best to forget it. If he had to retire, so be it. Besides, he hadn't rested in a long time and would take this opportunity to take his wife and kids on vacation to the garden planet he had just bought. With a smile, Lange closed his eyes, and his mouth began to water as he thought about what he had heard of the garden planet. A place with waterfalls of syrup, lakes of noodles with scallion oil, lamb skewers that sprouted from the ground, and trees full of draft beer fruits. Noticing this, the people felt somewhat confused and found it disgusting that he had become happy again. While Lange was lost in his thoughts, a hologram of Lunong appeared behind him. With eyes glowing with rage, he announced that he had an emergency announcement. Hearing Lunong's voice, Lange snapped out of his trance, his eyes widening with curiosity. Lunong stared at Lange, clenched his teeth, and with a furious gaze announced that the level 11 enforcer, Lange, due to negligence in the line of duty, had committed a grave and unforgivable error in his work. This had caused enormous and incalculable losses to the White Mist sector. The circumstances were severe, and his crime was unforgivable, for which the punishment was as follows: the lifelong revocation of his noble title, with his descendants forbidden from applying for noble status for 3 generations, his dismissal from the post of level 11 enforcer, and his banishment to the level 8 war planet to guard it for 3,000 years. Lange turned around and his eyes widened in fear, his body beginning to tremble in shock. Not long after, Lange dropped his box of belongings, letting it fall to the ground. Poor Lange fell to his knees, unable to stop himself from panicking. His mind was filled with questions. He didn't know why this was happening to him. Tears began to stream from his eyes like an endless river. He knew he was finished. He was lost. 3,000 years, and all for letting a single person escape. Consumed by despair, Lange collapsed to the ground, asking if his mistake was truly that serious. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone was training with martial fire. It was none other than Lu Sheng. Our boy clenched his fist, and as his eyes shone with determination, martial fire began to emerge from his body. Lu Sheng delivered a powerful blow, shattering the stone wall to pieces. Then, he turned his back and, as he walked away, he mentally reviewed his rewards. An unlimited supply of all necessary resources for cultivation, an honorary Viscount title, a full set of level 11 weapons and equipment, and the latest private spaceship. Lu Sheng returned to his mansion, sat on his sofa, and as he wiped away his sweat, he began to drink a delicious shake. He reflected on what it felt like to be the sector's darling. It was incredibly cool to have all the resources of an entire sector dedicated solely to him. Lu Sheng opened the system window and with a serene gaze began to browse through it, knowing that as long as it wasn't an overly excessive request, he could basically get anything he wanted. His eyes began to shine with joy, a smile appearing on his face. Now he wouldn't have to worry at all about resources for cultivation. He thought that when he left the blue planet, his goal had been to work hard to save up and buy a couple of habitable planets. However, almost carelessly, he now owned an entire star system. The system began to display a list of planets. Lu Sheng observed it attentively and with a smile, and decided to choose several good habitable planets to assign one to each main province of the Dragon Nation. Lu Sheng chose a planet, put his hand under his chin, and his eyes began to shine. With a mischievous smile, he decided that as for the other countries, it would be enough for them to cram onto a single planet. Lu Sheng began to imagine Milton scared witless, apologizing and begging for his life. With a serene gaze, Lu Sheng thought that now, if he wanted to teach Milton a lesson, he wouldn't need to beat around the bush anymore. He could stand right in front of his father and give him a couple of good slaps, and his father would probably even applaud and congratulate him on how well he had slapped him. Lu Sheng put his arms behind his head and wondered what his parents' reaction would be when they heard this news. At that moment, a woman with sensual legs began to walk towards him. It was an elf-eared woman carrying a folder with reports. She entered our boy's room and with a kind smile informed him that the planetary-class ships he had requested were all now in position. Hearing her voice, Lu Sheng snapped out of his trance, his eyes widening in surprise. Our boy stood up and with a calm smile, asked her to take him for a look, as he was quite curious about ships capable of housing the people of an entire planet. With a nervous expression, she adjusted a lock of her hair, began to look at the floor, and informed him that there was a snag. The ships couldn't depart yet, because this area belonged to the White Mist sector, and they were looking for a way to solve the problem. Lu Sheng put his hand under his chin, his eyes widening in confusion, puzzled that the area belonged to the White Mist sector. At that moment, our boy's phone started to ring. When he turned it on, he saw he had a video call from Snowy, his fiancée. In a worried tone, she asked him if he was busy. Lu Sheng grew curious and asked her what was wrong. Snowy's eyes began to fill with sadness. She looked down at the ground and revealed that the blue planet seemed to be in serious trouble. Lu Sheng was shocked, not knowing what was happening. Lu Sheng's mother and father were with Snowy, their expressions full of worry. The mother asked Qingshui if she had finished talking with little Sheng and if he had said when he would be back, as he had already been away for several months. The father, who was smoking, crossed his arms and began to ponder in silence. With a stern expression, he told his wife she was being silly. He reminded her that their son had gone into the universe and asked if she even knew how big it was, explaining that this wasn't like going to the corner market, a 10-minute round trip. He insisted that it wasn't that easy and that she should stop worrying over nothing. The mother's attention fixed on him, her eyes widening in surprise. The mother thought that he was right. She decided to go prepare a meal, hoping that little Sheng could return soon. With a kind smile, Snowy assured the mother that she shouldn't worry. She explained that Lu Sheng was doing wonderfully in the universe, and they even said he had become a count, so there was no reason for concern. As Snowy's eyes shone with tranquility, she turned to the father and with a smile, said she was going out for a walk. With a smile, the father nodded. Not long after, Snowy left the mansion and began to look at the ground with a lost expression. While she was distracted, a purple-haired woman appeared in front of her, catching her attention. Hearing her voice, Snowy raised her head, her eyes widening in surprise and curiosity. This woman was Lin Zhengyu, who extended her hand, greeted her as Mrs. Lu, and asked what Lu Sheng had said. Snowy observed her and, in a sincere tone, admitted that he would return as soon as he could, and that he would also help them solve this problem through other channels. Lin Zhengyu clenched her fist, her eyes filling with confusion. She didn't know what she meant by other channels. Snowy remained calm, revealing that she wasn't sure of the details, as he didn't go into specifics. He just told them not to worry. Lin Zhengyu lamented that, in the end, their power was too weak. As a planet from a low-level civilization, they only qualified to be exploited and oppressed. Her eyes began to shine with sadness and fear. She explained that the previous guide, named Lan Cheng, had been quite reasonable, but he had suddenly been replaced by a new one. Even though they had just collected the resources, this new one now wanted them to deliver them again, and the quota was hundreds of times higher than the last. She was sure he was just trying to line his own pockets. With a gaze full of curiosity and confusion, Snowy wondered if, judging by the situation, they couldn't gather enough. Lin Zhengyu began to ponder in silence. Then her eyes began to shine with seriousness. She stated that it was like trying to shear enough wool for an entire clothing factory from a single sheep. It was a completely impossible task. Not even by paying out of their own pockets could they gather half. Then she closed her eyes, accepting the unfair reality that the weak get bullied, and the skinny horse gets ridden. Snowy's eyes widened with serenity. She believed that when Lu Sheng returned, everything would be resolved without a problem. Lin Zhengyu clenched her fist, admitting that she actually preferred not to have to rely on Lu Sheng's power to solve this problem, but they had been pushed to the point of having no other choice. She began to imagine hundreds of spaceships ready to invade the blue planet. Her eyes started to shine with fear, knowing that with Lu Sheng's temperament, he would surely confront that guide upon his return. And while dealing with a single guide was easy, she feared that next time he would come with an entire star fleet behind him. The image of Lu Sheng came to her mind. She was sincere and admitted that Lu Sheng's talent and genius in martial arts were astonishing. Without a doubt, he had an immense future ahead of him. If, because of them, he provoked a powerful enemy and this hindered his martial path, then the inhabitants of the blue planet would be guilty of a crime that not even dying 10,000 times could atone for. Snowy stood listening in silence without interrupting. She placed a hand over her chest, and her eyes filled with sadness, admitting that she didn't really know how to describe Lu Sheng's current situation in the universe either. She only knew something about him being a count, and that he had just bought a spaceship to pick them up, but she didn't quite understand what level all of this represented. She lifted her head and began to recall the video call she had with Lu Sheng. With a kind and confident smile, Lu Sheng had assured her that he had the power to solve it and that they should wait for him to return. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng met with Sebastian and Ecclesia. While they conversed, Sebastian was sitting and drinking a glass of wine. Lu Sheng turned to them and, as his eyes shone with tranquility, he told them more or less what the situation was. Calmly, Sebastian took a sip of his wine, Lu Sheng's gaze fixed on him, his eyes widening with seriousness. Now that he thought about it, he felt a little embarrassed. The chairman was in charge of countless planets of all sizes, and here he was, asking him to personally help resolve such an insignificant matter. To him, this was like someone having a chicken stolen from their yard and going directly to the emperor for justice, and to top it all off, the emperor of another country. Lu Sheng turned to Ecclesia and asked the chief of justice how they could resolve this situation, admitting that he didn't know who else to turn to and asking if she had any solution. Hearing our boy's voice, she snapped out of her trance, feeling somewhat surprised and not knowing what to say. She placed her hand under her chin and with a calm expression mentioned that the blue star was, in the end, a resource planet subordinate to the white mist star zone, so the forces of the Yamu star zone couldn't intervene directly. However, this was easy to handle. She just needed to contact some star nobles close to his home star system. She extended her hand, assuring him that with the influence of these nobles, resolving a small problem from the resource department wouldn't be difficult at all. She informed him that she would arrange it immediately and that there was no need to rush. Lu Sheng thanked her. As Ecclesia's eyes were shining with love, she placed her hand on her chest. She told him that this was a minor matter and that, actually, she also had something she needed to bother him with. Hearing this, with a curious smile, Lu Sheng extended his hand, curious to hear it. Lu Sheng placed his hand over his chest and with a sincere expression, promised her that if it was something he could do, he would certainly do his best. Ecclesia began to ponder in silence, knowing that Lu Sheng was someone to be trusted. Lu Sheng placed his hand under his chin and sank into his thoughts. The Yamu star sector had done a lot for him lately. The White Hole Explorer ship alone was worth several billion black crystal coins, and that was just the cost of materials, not the selling price. As for the other cultivation resources, they were countless. He had taken so much that he felt ashamed. His eyes began to shine with seriousness. This time, they had even helped solve the problems at his home, and he really wouldn't feel at ease if he didn't do something in return for the Yamu star sector. With a kind smile, Sebastian extended his hand and asked our boy if he was interested in joining a combat competition and skill exchange with geniuses from other star sectors to improve martial prowess. Hearing this, Lu Sheng snapped out of his thoughts, his eyes widening with curiosity and confusion, and asked for the specific details. With a serious gaze, Sebastian stood up, began to point his finger at Lu Sheng, and clarified that, in the name of the Yamu star sector, they would join with the 13 surrounding star sectors to launch a grand-scale, inter-sector, star-level martial genius exchange tournament. Sebastian began to raise his hand in the air, and not long after, a hologram of the entire universe appeared. In a calm tone, he explained to Lu Sheng that when the time came, they would gather every super genius from the 13 star sectors, hailing from every civilization and race. Lu Sheng's attention was fixed on the hologram, and he sank into his thoughts. Sebastian's eyes began to shine with determination, a smile appearing on his face as he revealed that they would be his sparring partners. Lu Sheng couldn't help but smile, knowing this was the grand stage of the stars, a place where all races would compete for supremacy and prodigies would clash. The mere idea of being able to pinch the little heads of those star-level geniuses from different sectors and species ridiculously excited him. After giving it some thought, Shang approached Sebastian and, with a calm expression, mentioned that he accepted to participate in the tournament and asked when it would begin. Sebastian began to stroke his beard, closed his eyes, and asked Shang not to be hasty. He explained that, for now, this was just an idea of his. He still had to ask if the other star domains agreed, and the exact list of participants was still under discussion. Sebastian tapped Shang on the chest, causing his eyes to widen in surprise. Sebastian began to stare intently at Shang and made it clear that he was the key, and that the only thing he needed to do right now was to continue cultivating, and become stronger. Ecclesia approached and interrupted them, explaining to Shang that although an immortal grade bloodline was powerful, his current strength level was still a bit low. She crossed her arms and her eyes began to shine with seriousness. She explained that the other star domains surely didn't have immortal grade geniuses, but that across a dozen of them, there would be at a minimum, some at the glimmer moon and sunlight levels. 12th level powerhouses would not participate, but there would definitely be no shortage of 11th level ones. Sebastian, who had his arms behind his back, admitted that she was right, but warned Shang not to get carried away by the excitement. Although the goal was to bring people to be his sparring partners, winning or the rankings didn't really matter. In any case, his future prospects were tens of thousands of times wider than all of theirs combined. Shang listened in silence without interrupting. Sebastian closed his eyes and let out a sigh. Then his body began to release an intense and powerful green martial energy. He still hoped that this unprecedented tournament of top geniuses among the star sectors would be a demonstration of power, showcasing the value of immortal grade bloodlines and elevating the prestige of their Yamu star sector. Shang began to gaze toward the ground, and an excited smile spread across his face. His eyes began to shine with confidence, and he asked Sebastian if all the opponents would be solely 11th level. He declared that this was not enough and that, at a minimum, they should bring more 12th level martial arts prodigies. Otherwise, the pressure would be too small. Hearing this, Sebastian's and Ecclesia's eyes widened in surprise, and their jaws dropped in shock. At the same time on the blue planet, on some island near the sea, it was daytime, and seagulls were soaring through the sky. Not far away, there was a group of women in bikinis enjoying a beautiful day at the beach, and behind them was a fat guy with glasses drinking coconut water. After taking a sip, he activated his watch and with a smile, asked Mars to guess how much profit he had made this time. The watch began to project a hologram of a man with elf ears, who with a confused gaze mentioned that he didn't know. A confident smile spread across the fat guy's face and, holding up a finger, he revealed that it was 100,000, at least 100,000, and in black crystal coins. Hearing this, Mars's eyes widened in surprise and his jaw dropped in shock. He couldn't believe that he wasn't joking and that a profit of this kind was actually possible. The fat guy lay back in the hammock and began to laugh heartily. He explained that Mars had no idea how rich this low-level resource planet really was. His predecessor had been a fool, because every time he came to collect resources, he took exactly the amount the boss ordered him to, making him a complete idiot in his eyes. He set the coconut on the table and with an arrogant expression mentioned that this was a good thing, since if Lan Cheng hadn't been stupid, it wouldn't have benefited him anyway. The fat guy relaxed, knowing that by just coming here a few more times, it wouldn't take him long to save up enough to buy a house, a spaceship, and even pay the dowry to marry Marina. The fat guy started laughing like crazy. The gifts he had given in the past certainly weren't in vain, as they had transferred him to the resource department all at once. The perks were truly extraordinary. He made back the money he spent on the gifts in a single trip. Mars started staring at the fat guy and couldn't help but feel envious. Working at the lowest levels was tough, while the fat guy received the best treatment and service on every resource planet. He also got to enjoy the scenery of different planets, not to mention the beauties and gourmet food. Mars's eyes began to shine with rage, causing him to clench his fists tightly. He exclaimed that the fat guy had it made and that he also wanted to be transferred to the resource department. With a confident smile, the fat guy explained that he couldn't look at it that way, since some places were full of perks, while others were so barren that not even birds would shit there. The map of the blue planet came to his mind as he explained that, for example, his current location, Blue Planet A28462, seemed ordinary and its martial civilization had only begun 300 years ago. However, no one would have thought that their exploration of the planet's star vein energy crystal deposits had reached 90%. This planet alone had brought him nearly 10,000 black crystal coins. Mars closed his eyes and crossed his arms. He considered this outrageous and warned him to be careful, since such a rich production of energy crystals must mean the presence of many martial powerhouses. According to him, the people from lower civilizations were all brutes, and if he provoked them, they might team up to slaughter him. While Mars was speaking, the fat guy just smiled, mentioning that he was more cautious than him and that he had investigated it a long time ago. The highest level on the blue planet was only 9, and there were fewer than 100 of them. As for the civilization's heritage, the fat guy started watching 2 women playing in the sea. As for the civilization's heritage, it seemed quite strange to him. The foundational martial heritage looked quite advanced, but the top tier one was terribly behind. The fat guy started to imagine Liu Shang surrounded by intense martial energy, and Mars revealed that this seemed to be because a genius called the God of War had appeared on this planet and had already left for the stars. He supposed that those high-level heritages at the lower levels were bought from the outside and spread there. After all, low-level material was cheap. Mars's eyes began to shine with seriousness as he warned him that geniuses from native civilizations capable of leaving their planet weren't simple, and that he should watch his step or he'd trigger a trap. The fat guy couldn't help but smile. He gestured dismissively and asked with disdain if Mars really thought he should be afraid of them. He explained that this planet hadn't even been approved for a level 10 martial license, which meant it had never produced a warrior above level 10. He claimed that they could bring him as many level 9 warriors as they wanted. He would take them all on. While the fat guy was sunbathing, Mars decided to tell him that if that was the case, he should do as he pleased, and added that something big had happened recently in the core star sector. Mars clenched his fist tightly and with a gaze full of seriousness revealed that in the neighboring Yamu star sector, a super genius with a transcendent, immortal-grade physique had appeared, something that had sent shockwaves through every star sector. Hearing this, the fat guy first adjusted his glasses, and then his eyes widened in surprise and fear, leaving him in shock. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. An immortal grade was something he had always considered a mere legend. Mars put a hand to his face, let out a sigh, and told the fat guy to just look it up for himself. The fat guy's attention was fixed on him, his mind filled with curiosity. Mars spread his hands and decided to tell the inside story, explaining that the genius was originally from their White Mist star zone, but due to the negligence of a certain enforcer, the Yamu star zone had secretly snatched him away. As a consequence, that enforcer ended up being exiled to the Warfield star for 3,000 years. After many explanations, the fat guy placed his hand under his chin and couldn't help but smile, realizing that all of this had actually happened and that the Yamu star zone had some very cunning methods. Mars began to imagine several high-ranking nobles and explained that, right now, the nobles of the core star zone were searching for talent like crazy on the low-level civilized worlds of their own domains, and that this had become a genuine trend. With his face covered in sweat, Mars started pointing his finger at him and decided to remind him not to overstep his bounds on the low-level resource planets. Otherwise, if he provoked some monstrous prodigy, he wouldn't be able to handle the consequences. With a nervous expression, the fat guy started waving his hand dismissively, promising that he would never cross someone so important, since he was in star cluster number 2837, basically the suburbs of the suburbs. At that moment, Mars's watch began to beep and with a nervous expression, he revealed that, apparently, that genius had been found right in their star cluster. Hearing this, the fat guy took off his glasses, his eyes widening in fear, wondering if Mars was playing a joke on him. With a furious gaze, the fat guy accused him of being an alarmist. He claimed that even if the genius really was in cluster 2837, there were tens of millions of life-bearing planets there, making the probability 1 in 100 million. He was so sure he wouldn't run into him that he swore that if he did, he would do a handstand and have diarrhea on the spot, and then drink it all up. Thanks for watching Vivify Recaps. If you enjoyed it, hit like, subscribe, and drop your next recap request in the comments. See you in the next one.